All right, man. Saturday afternoon, it was the Houston Texans defeating the Cleveland Browns 45-14. At the end of the day, 3 out of these 4 games were not very close.
Yeah.
But Texans get the win, man, and they're moving on. It was a great performance by C.J. Stroud in his NFL debut. Playoff debut, and Bobby Slowick in his NFL play calling debut. I think the buzz is very high. Our friend Bobby might be getting a job pretty soon here.
Man's going to be a head coach after a year doing this.
Yeah.
He really might be. I mean,
it's legit.
Stroud was excellent. I don't think you can say, anything against it. The man averaged 13 yards per attempt. Like, his numbers are insane. But I do feel like this was more Bobby than Stroud this time. Like, this one, wow. Like, he was absolutely in his bag. They had a clear game plan of this Browns defense is really good. It's aggressive. Remember earlier in the season, we were sort of saying, as good as that defense is, it's a little bit vulnerable to big plays sometimes where it gets like hyper aggressive and somebody gives you like a little bit of misdirection, a bait and switch, and they hit you with something else, and they have a tendency to give up some big plays. Bobby found them all.
All of them.
Right.
Yes.
And maybe this is where having access to PFF systems helps. You understand how the thing works. You can find all those plays where they gave up big things.
Yeah, and there was another play where there was another open touchdown to be had there. Stroud ends up with only a few incompletions, 16 of 21. By the way, his stat line looked almost identical to Jordan Love, which we'll talk about later. But Stroud got away with a turnover-worthy play in there too, and then missed a wide-open touchdown that would have been 50-plus yards as well. Like the stat line, 16 of 21 for 274, 3 touchdowns, no picks, could have been even bigger if he hits the open deep ball that's there too. So you're right. There were open throws left and right, and the Texans absolutely exploited the back 7 of the Browns.
The touchdown to Dalton Schultz, I think, was an amazing example of just like what Bobby was doing during the game for the entirety of it. They, ran a sort of fake run, bootleg off the back of it. So already, initially you got the Browns defense going one way, you bootleg off the back. Now, all right, everything's going, the other side. So all the defense is now moving back to the other side of the field. And normally what happens when you're bootlegging off in one particular side, all the routes are kind of going in that direction, and it's just a high-low concept, right? You're reading 1 to 2 to 3 vertically and finding the open guy. So the Texans have Dalton Schultz running what looks like a corner route, which would be exactly the route you would expect, going to that side towards the way that C.J. Stroud is running. Instead, it's a corner post. So he bends towards the corner and then bends back against the grain. Now the entire defense is flowing in the other direction, and he's just wide the hell open, breaking back across the other side of the defense that sort of panicked and tried to close down what they gave up because they were so aggressive closing down the first thing. So like fake 1, fake 2, wide open guy cuts back against the grain and nobody's covering him. Just an amazing play call. And that was at a fairly key point in the game. It was reasonably close up until then. They get that touchdown and then Joe Flacco melts down and then the game's gone.
I was telling you off air, I feel like I want to talk more about just the high level, what do these games mean? We often go through the entire game flow, and we will. We'll talk about some of the key plays and everything. But this game, it was all offense early on. It was back and forth. Cleveland, they were counterpunching early on too. It wasn't just the Texans, but as you said, this play before the half, it was 17-14, the throwback to Dalton Schultz here. It was 17-14 just before the half, puts the Texans up 10. And then you get some Flacco meltdown in there and everything. And
Flacco no.
Flacco what?
Flacco no.
Flacco no.
Oh no.
Oh, I get
Flacco no.
Flacco no is what you're saying. Mm-hmm. I got you. Yeah. Even if you just look at all 3 touchdowns from Stroud too, you've got a wide receiver screen in there, another well-designed play to put Nico Collins in space. You have Brevin Jordan on a little pass to the flat where he just outruns the Browns defense for 76 yards, and then the 37-yarder to Dalton Schultz that you mentioned. Texans, unbelievable play calling offensively. They also did a nice job making Myles Garrett not really have much of an impact in the game, especially as a pass rusher. And, just overall outstanding offensive performance by Houston. And then their defense stepped up with the multiple pick sixes on Flacco.
Yeah, multiple pick sixes. They got consistent pressure. Derek Barnett, again, showed up with a bunch of pressures. That's been one of the pickups of the season. Like,
Really
totally
has.
under the radar, totally, just didn't cost them, like, completely shot to nothing type of pickup at a former first-round pick. And he's been, like, a consistent source of pressure there. Remember, like, every Texans edge rusher came into this game with an injury. Dealing with I think they were all ankles as well. Like, all of them just hobbled. Jonathan Grenard had some pressure, kind of left the game a couple of times dealing with that ankle. Will Anderson had some good plays. But Derek Barnett was a big part of it as well, including a sack. And, like, he's been such a good pickup for them.
So 24-14 at the half. It was the Texans, and then mentioned the pick sixes. They both happened within about 2 minutes of each other in the third quarter. When I was watching Flacco this year, I feel like two things were true. He was playing with better anticipation than I could ever remember, but he also still had some of those anti-anticipation plays, the late in the down, just Flacco type of plays that were always a part of his game. Just bad decisions under pressure, bad decisions late in the down, bad decisions not seeing safeties, whatever it was. I feel like Flacco I think both of those things were true. His little run here with the Browns, I don't remember him throwing receivers open at the level that he did. I mean, it was completely different from what we saw, even when he was with Baltimore. And then the last time we saw him as a starter with the Broncos and the few games with the Jets. But there were still those turnover-worthy plays on Flacco's tape. And in this one, trying to make a play under pressure, just kind of heaves it up. While getting hit, Steven Nelson picks it off, brings it back 82 yards. And then just straight up misreads the underneath coverage. Christian Harris picks it off for a 36-yard.
Yeah, I mean, we pointed out heading into this game that he hadn't really had the implosion game yet that has always been a specter, on the horizon of a Joe Flacco season. Remember, when he started for the Jets, like, he had a couple of games that looked like what we had for Cleveland, which was 300-yard performances, quite productive. And then the next game, he had a grade of like 20-something and just a complete meltdown. And the Jets were like, that's enough of that. On with somebody else. And they got rid of him, essentially. He hadn't had that yet for the Browns. And to be fair, this game wasn't, that. It wasn't a 27 grade or anything. But he had multiple plays where it's like, come on, you can't do that. You just can't. You are too experienced. You're too, good at this to just throw the ball blindly to the defense like that. And you did it twice in the space of a couple of minutes, and that was the game. Like, it was a reasonably close game. Houston, gave a big punch and made it put you under pressure, and you completely just imploded under the pressure and threw the game away in a few minutes, and that was it. It was never close again. So it was always a possibility for a Joe Flacco performance to have one of those games, and unfortunately he showed up with it in the playoffs.
Yeah, the Browns, they did try to run the ball a little bit early on too. Kareem Hunt, Jerome Ford, they couldn't get anything going. And I know I was joking about the playoff cliches. We're in the middle of this game where the offense is back and forth, and again, there's 76-yard busted coverage touchdowns and the whole deal. And the playoff cliches of need to be able to run the ball and play defense. And there was no defense in the first half until the second half where the Texans defense scored twice. But there is something to the Browns becoming that one-dimensional with Flacco under center. And it's like, all right, over time, if he drops back 40-plus times, the defense will have an opportunity to make plays, and they have to take advantage of them, and they did. And we've talked a lot about Houston this year being just on the upswing defensively. I think that's the fun part about this Texans team right now is, C.J. Stroud didn't look like a star, I don't think, week 1 or 2. It was like, all right, those are, pretty good rookie performances early in his career. Stroud continued to get better. Bobby continued to get better. You saw more and more from Nico Collins. You saw them unlock different types of playmakers. So the offense continues to progress. And it took the defense, I think, a tick longer. But then the defense started to get there. And all of a sudden, halfway through the season, Derek Stingley playing the best football of his career outside of corner. Will Anderson continued to get better. Jonathan Grenard. You see the linebackers playing well throughout much of the season. So now the defense started to take on the identity of DeMeco Ryans as well, which was this overachieving, feisty defense for years with the Niners when D'Amico was at the helm. That's what makes the Texans intriguing, both for the playoff run here and beyond, that the young players continue to progress, and it's, taking them to the divisional round now.
Yeah, I mean, the Texans and the Packers feel like sort of similar stories to me in terms of they're both incredibly young and like way ahead of schedule. Like neither one of these teams was expected to be in the playoffs this year, and both of them not only made it, but then shocked somebody once they got there and may just be way ahead of the curve and theoretically are going to be getting better and maybe on an accelerated timeline because of all those young players and the impacts that they're making. Like, Stroud has been incredible this season and getting better in the course of the year. He was really good in this game. I don't want to take anything away from him. I just think that the overwhelming kind of takeaway was the scheme is a step ahead. Like it's everything they're calling is absolutely putting the Browns defense in an absolute bind. And like the Browns offense has been obviously struggling and dealt with its own problems this season down to quarterback 4. They're the first team in 20 years to make the playoffs while leading the league in turnovers. So that should sort of tell you something about what this team is. It's like, okay, this is the team whose defense has been like dragging them to the postseason despite an offense that ordinarily would have sunk their year. And then if you're able to exploit the defense, which is what the Texans offense and Bobby Slowick were able to do, now they're just done because the offense is going to turn the ball over as it has all season long. And when that happens, it's game over.
And obviously a lot of those turnovers come from P.J. Walker and DTR and everything. But again, Flacco was this incredible combination of, big plays. He added a lot of big plays to this Cleveland offense, getting David Njoku involved and everything down the stretch, but also putting the ball in harm's way. Both things were happening during the Flacco run here for the Browns.
He now ends his season with the same number of turnover-worthy plays as big-time throws, 11 of each, a 4% turnover-worthy play rate, which is pretty high and basically where his baseline was during a lot of his career when he wasn't that great.
Anything else, any other big stuff coming out of this game? Again, Stroud finishes with with outstanding numbers. I think we get a lot of questions about the PFF system. I think the stat line for Stroud and Jordan Love being almost identical, but they're going to end up with different grades, I think is going to be a good educator, I guess. I think, to your point earlier, Stroud, I think, benefited a little. I'm not trying to take anything away. His grade won't be as good as Jordan Love. He benefited a little bit more from, again, wide receiver screen touchdown, open in the flat touchdown. But Stroud, once again, another great throw under pressure where he can't even follow through and he still gets it out there to Nico Collins. But my biggest takeaway, and not just because Bobby's our friend, I cannot believe how many open receivers the Texans schemed up here against this Cleveland defense that using EPA was unbelievable. I mean, one of the best defenses in the league over the last few years. But again, I think we highlighted there were big plays to be made this year, and maybe some of those weren't hit at times because the pass rush was so good. And so the Texans were able to take out the pass rush for the most part and scheme up those big plays, give Stroud just enough time. Also, Stroud, man, some of the subtle pocket movement that he has is really incredible.
Yeah.
Because there were a few quick wins for Browns defenders. And it didn't really matter because, again, there was an open receiver, but Stroud was buying time and maneuvering the pocket and just making sure that he got it out there to him. So just incredible NFL debut there, and great job scheming it up by Houston.
We should at least talk about the Myles Garrett thing a little bit. PFF's Defensive Player of the Year. Now, that doesn't change in the playoffs because it's a regular season award. But primarily Steelers fans were making the point of, hey, why would the best player in the NFL this year disappear in the postseason? Versus a guy like TJ Watt, who seems to show up in the biggest moments and make the biggest plays and change games. Myles Garrett was relatively anonymous in this game. To what do we put that down to?
I mean, first off, I think he was one-on-one with Laramie Tunsil a bunch, and Tunsil's really good. He did have Garrett when he did win. I mentioned the Stroud play, like the second or third pass of the game for Stroud was maybe Garrett's quickest win, and Stroud just subtly rolled to the right, flipped it out there to Dalton Schultz. It was Dalton Schultz drop, again, wide open. And, it didn't matter. I think this happens all the time because our grading system is looking at the block interaction. And the block interaction, look, remember for years we talked about coverage versus pass rush and debating it and everything. They do work hand in hand. And if the pass rusher wins quickly, but there's an open receiver and the QB's throwing in rhythm, the pass rusher can be negated, and he's not necessarily a big part of the game. So I don't think Garrett had a very good game rushing the passer. And when he did win, the ball was out quickly, or Stroud was rolling out or dumping it off or whatever it was. So, yeah, there was not a big impact by Myles Garrett as a pass rusher. He had a couple good plays in the run game, and that was pretty much it.
I think it also shows you the power of help by alignment. When you look at what they were doing, so there were so many plays where they had a tight end or a back to that side, and he didn't even need to chip him. Like, just the threat of, I'm going to release right past the left tackle, and so Garrett now assumes he's going to get chipped because of the way the running back or the back is attacking, and it takes away one of his ways of winning. Like, he's now not trying to win around the edge, which I think for Garrett this year has probably been by far his biggest strength. Like, his best way of winning has been that speed edge rush, the dip, get around the edge, bend the corner. He's been so good at that. And even against good players who know it's coming, like, his ability to sink and get around that tight corner has been insane. They basically took it away without having to actually dedicate an extra blocker to it. They just went, hey, on your way by, threatened to throw the shoulder at him, and then he just didn't even try and take that pathway. He's like, well, now I'm only bull rushing or coming on an inside move, and Laramie Tunsil can get that done if he knows he doesn't have to concern himself with the outside thing. So there were a couple of plays, in particular, actually, when they moved him inside and they got him on a guard, which they've done a couple of times this year. There were some plays there where he's one-on-one against the guard, and you're like, okay, that probably should have been a win. Like, you one-on-one with a left guard should be a win for you, and it wasn't. So I think Myles Garrett absolutely didn't have a great game, but I also think, again, I mean, just in the middle of a game plan that was designed around wrecking the entire defense, Bobby's just like, oh, and we're going to have Myles Garrett taken care of just on the side, Like, don't even worry about that. I have that covered by where the back and the tight end is. Not a problem. I mean, it's pretty impressive. You go through and just watch his snaps. The number of plays where there's either a guy to that side already and he's releasing past Garrett, or like the motion man in the backfield, the back coming across the formation, or that is going straight past Garrett's pathway, is pretty impressive.
The game that comes to mind, because you could take one pass rusher out of games.
Yeah.
Schematically.
I mean, Donald is the perfect example of that. Like, Donald has spent most of his career at this point not being given one-on-one opportunities. Like, they have said, we are taking you out of this game by the game plan. And I watched a video a year or two ago where Donald was talking about how much tape study he has to do in order to identify the occasional play where they're effectively going to lapse or just let him have a one-on-one because of whatever they're doing. Like, he has to spend his entire time watching tape so that he's paying attention for those plays, because they barely ever come around. And he's like, oh, when I get one-on-one, I need to know about it so that I win immediately and get pressure, because otherwise I'm taken out of the game.
Yeah, and there have been games where Donald didn't get a ton of hurries or pressure because of all that. I mean, it happens. The game that comes to mind was last year's Kansas City game against the 49ers and Nick Bosa. It felt like everything the Chiefs did kept Nick Bosa off balance, right? They would run a boot at him. They would run away from him. They would screen. I mean, it was like they did everything they could to keep that one guy on a string, and he made limited impact. That stuff can happen. So, I don't know. We don't want to overreact to just the, Steelers hashtag, 300 follower people that are attacking us on Twitter. But it was worth acknowledging, why was Myles Garrett quiet in this game? Because, the Texans, they did a great job everywhere. So next up for Houston.
It's also, Myles Garrett had 3 pressures in the game, which was also 3 times more than any other Browns player. Like, forget Myles Garrett. They took all of the Browns' pass rush out of the game.
There were only 21 dropbacks.
Right.
Right? And then again, the ball was coming out quick to wide open receivers.
Yeah. Nobody on the Browns' defense made an impact.
Yeah. Next up for Houston, the more likely scenario is Houston going to Baltimore, and that would be the first game Saturday? First game on Saturday. Houston in that 4 o'clock window on Saturday. If Pittsburgh pulls the upset against Buffalo this afternoon, we'll see Houston go to Kansas City Sunday night. Either way, watching Stroud, Bobby, and the Texans going into Baltimore, or again, which is where they made their debut, into Kansas City is going to be #fun.
If they want to win and go on a run, like if Houston wants to be in the Super Bowl, there's a pretty high chance now that they are going to have to go through the 3 best defenses in the AFC in order to do it. That would be a hell of a resume.
It really would. So good start there though for Houston. And for PFF Bobby, who's got interviews starting tomorrow.
Yeah, I texted him. I told him if he wants, a recommendation, if he wants a reference for his interview, I'll tell him. He's a hard worker. He, good team guy. Like I'll be his reference.
I already have.
Well, you've already done it?
No, I don't know. I think last time I saw, he is the favorite for the Titans job.
Yeah, but nobody. He's the favorite. But, it felt like, I don't know who's getting this job, so let's just list names.
Yeah, I don't know how they set those odds other than probably looking at connections, but Rand Carthon, the general manager, was in San Francisco at the same time as Bobby, and you do get some of that sometimes. So we might end up seeing Bobby working with Will Levis over in Tennessee.
That would be interesting.
Maybe he's one and done in Houston. And
I don't remember what his take on Levis is, do you?
I can't
I wouldn't say it out loud. I don't remember what it was.
I don't know. Yeah, I can't say anything.
No.
Yeah, can't say anything. I'll tell you off air.
Cool.
But look, they chose Stroud. Bryce Young went ahead of them, and that may have been the options that the teams at the top of the draft had.